Hello, BookTube. I'm here to do a tag. I haven't done too many tags lately. I have been tagged in a few, and Pat at Book Time, Book Chat, not Book Time, Book Chat with Pat, tagged me in the Snob-O-Meter Tag. Now that was originally done by, or an original tag by that reading guy, 28. And there are 11 questions and then a tag at the end. And it's about snobbery. Now, I'll go through each question. Prompt number one, question number one is, what is your definition of book snobbery? And I'm looking off my phone here, so that's why I'm looking down. Now, I think there's a couple definitely because you got the word book in this. Now, it can be like that you look down on paperbacks as opposed to hardcovers, and things like that, or the style or the printing or the age of the book, the quality, the condition of a book. There's that, because the word book is in there, that can be a book snobbery, or it can be directed towards the person who's reading it, but it doesn't say read snobbery. So I'm going by people who either own or collect certain type of books. That's because the word book, it's not reading, it's book. So I know everybody's taking it for the reading thing, but I'm going literally, it says book. So, and you look down on the person for having paperbacks or only hardcovers, or they're not collecting, incumulables, or um, antiquarian books. They're collecting, hyper modern first, and you look down upon that because that's not the thing to do. You look down on that person. So you apply the snobbery of the book style or edition towards the person, and you look down at that person for that for their collecting or the books that they have. That's how I am defining book snobbery, because it's not talking about reading. Okay, number two, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? And then brackets such as, would you ever read a romance? Or if you regularly read romance, would you ever try a science fiction novel? Now, there's nothing that I would say a genre that I would never try. There are genres that I don't read, and I don't read generally romance. There are romance in books that I read, but when it's one track and it's just the romance, I don't find that interesting at all. Uh, and I do read science fiction, but again, it's like there's certain types of science fiction that I like more than others. I also don't read self-help books because I find them just absolutely useless, and um, like they don't work for me, because it's just they state the obvious anyway. So I don't see any use in self-help books. Number three, does erotica count as literature? Well, again, you need to define literature. Literature can be like somebody's passing out pamphlets with some information about their charity or something like that. That's literature. They're passing out literature. Or are you talking about literature? Are you talking about something that is on a higher plane, or supposedly on a higher plane of writing and style? Okay. Now, is erotica count as literature in the first sense that I said? Well, obviously, anything that's written is literature in that sense. Now, the other sense, it depends on what you define as that higher plane. So, if you do, you know, have a definition that this has to be, more quality writing and the style of writing, then a lot of genres don't always fit into that, but there's some that would. Genre fiction, for the sake of being genre, sometimes are not. It's not the style of writing that is the well, that's wrong. There is the style of writing because you get pulp fiction, and people like the pulp fiction. But obviously, that's different than, say, somebody, Balzac, Victor Hugo, Charles Dickens. There's clear differences between the style of writing. So if you class one as literature, and then you're making separations. So, but any genre fiction can be under whoever definition of literature, of the higher literature, if they choose to define it that way. There's always going to be something in that genre fiction that will fit in there. So yes, in other words, erotica can count as literature. Number 4, is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? Well, I don't think it's better or worse for anybody. It's whatever you like. However, I think if you all you read is classic fiction, chances are those were popular sellers at the time. So you are a lot of times reading popular fiction anyway. It's just you're out of step with the times. But some people don't read older stuff. I think they're missing out. I think also too that you can be missing out on like newer fiction for the bestsellers. But generally, bestsellers means literally that. It's the zeitgeist of the time, like of today, and everybody's getting on the bandwagon. Publishers getting on the bandwagon to publish something that's similar or the same as something else. That's generally bestsellers. And then when an outlier comes in and becomes a bestseller, then all of a sudden the copycats come in to become other bestsellers on that list. But is one better than the other? Well, it may be for you and it may be for me, So it could be. But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't look down on anybody for reading just, bestsellers. I would try to, see if they'd be interested in something else, because there might be other things that they would like. So maybe expanding scope. Number 5, have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? No. Some people think that, but it's like, well, have I read this? Yeah, I've read that. It's just like, it's like people do use Proust as that kind of thing, and I'm going, I don't think you're more smarter or less smart whether you've read it or not. That to me just doesn't make sense. Number 6, do audiobooks count as reading? No, it's not reading. It's audio. Simple. I don't understand the argument about this. It's not reading. The person you're listening to is reading the text, but you're not reading it. You're listening to it. Is it a legitimate way to consume a story? Yes. Why not? But it's not reading. You are not reading this. It's like, to me, there is no argument there whatsoever. You're listening. When you see something and you're watching a movie, you're not reading the book. It's an interpretation, and the reader is interpreting it. So you've got another layer of interpretation in it, which is perfectly fine. It's like listening to a radio play. That's another way. Going to a theater and watching a stage play. That's another interpretation. But you're not reading the text. It's as simple as that. There's just no reading involved. But it's a legitimate way to consume it. But it's not reading, people, because you're not reading it. You're listening to it. It's a simple thing. Because you're doing different things. Your brain is doing different things, because your imagination is fueled by the way the person's speaking. They're doing all this, and you're not consuming it in the same way. So no, it's not reading. It is legitimate to consume, but it's not reading. Oh, there's another part to that question. If I found, okay, what about comic books or graphic novels? Well, you're reading something, aren't you? If there's no text in it, then you're not reading it. You're looking at the pictures. But if there's text or bubbles with words in it, and you read those words, then you're reading. You are reading. It's as simple as that. Like, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't understand the issue behind these things. It's very simple. Reading, listening, seeing, reading. Very simple. And let me see. Number 7. Have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? A book with little substance to it, for example, or a self-help book or celebrity memoir. I don't look down on the person. I sometimes would wonder. It depends on if I know what they read. If they always read Dickens and all this, or always science fiction, and they pick up a self-help book, I'm going, why are you reading that? Then I want to know why. Wouldn't look down on a person. If a person only read that kind of stuff, I would want to know, well, why are you reading only that kind of stuff when there's so much else out there? And I'd want to ask questions. I don't think I'd look down on the person. I would only look down on the person if they think that everybody else should only read that kind of stuff. Then I would look down at that person because of their opinions of everybody else. Let me see. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yeah, science fiction is a perfect thing. I've known academics before, and academics are pretty good at this. They think that science fiction is just not worth reading. But meanwhile, they'll consume murder mysteries till the cows come home. Yeah, I see the contradiction there, but they don't. So because I read science fiction, they have looked down on me. Have I got all these? Yeah, I think so. Number 9. Would you ever be friends with a snob? Maybe you already are. Well, it depends. Depends on what kind of snob they are. If they're someone who looks down on everybody and even me for whatever, and if you're talking about reading books or whatever, I would find it kind of hard to be friends with somebody who thinks that I'm trash, and that's what you think of somebody who you look down on in their snobbery. And it's like, I don't think I'd want to be friends with people like that. There's some people that have preferences, but I wouldn't call that snobbery. Or some people jokingly, do stuff like that, but they're in their hearts, they're not really snobs. It goes by what they say, and if they continually look down on people in that way, then they are snobs. But there's different levels of snobs as well. Everybody has a snobbery, I believe, issue with them for something. Um, and it might be just kept internally. Some people will vocalize it constantly, but it's the ones that are really vocal. And so I'm talking about, Snob-O-Meter. Like, I'm talking the ones that are above, off the camera here. Then no, I don't think I could be. I don't know anybody that I'm friends with that is like that at all. So, number 10, are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? That's an interesting question. I've heard that, or I've heard answers to this for a few people. And some people think that they are. Well, see, this thing, a person who reads who's never lived cannot be that sophisticated because they haven't experienced anything. I think somebody who has experienced life in many ways and has done a lot of stuff can be very sophisticated and not be a reader. I think their sophistication would be enhanced by reading, but I don't think. Okay, so you got this person who's lived life in many facets for, you know, for a long time. They've experienced life. I think they can be very sophisticated. Then you got somebody who hasn't lived life. They haven't done anything much. They've lived a very careful life. They've just gone to work, gone back, never any upsets, never had any financial difficulties or emotional like heartache or anything like that, hardly at all. But read a lot. Now, I don't think they can be as sophisticated as the person who has lived life as much. I don't think they can. I think that gives it, but I think to be the most sophisticated is to have both. You have to have lived a life and to have read as well, because whatever you've lived, you might read a book that talks about the same thing, but there's going to be subtleties and differences in it, and it'll make you look at things a little different. If you just read about that, you don't have the life experience to compare it to see how it augments your experiences, enhances your experiences, or anything like that, to look at things in a different way. I think it's both. So you need both to be actually fully sophisticated. But I think, as I say, I'm repeating myself, but that if you've lived a life of all sorts of things, and not just a quiet life, you can be more sophisticated than somebody who hasn't had that. Then again, like when I'm talking about quiet life, because what do you mean by that? I'm literally talking about somebody who has never had any hardships in their lives, and there are people like that. They've never had anything, so getting the bus late is a huge, missing the bus or something like that is a huge thing for them. To somebody else, it's like, it's not much. So it's that kind of thing. And there's other ways to experience life of not having to gone out and travel and do things and had hardships piled upon you. There's different ways of experiencing life, and you could have a quiet life and still have, emotional difficulties, and that maybe the other person doesn't have. But I'm talking about somebody who doesn't have that is just gets their experience in quotation marks from reading. They can't be sophisticated. They can't be very sophisticated. That's for sure. But then again, if the person is like that and has a comfortable life and doesn't read, then they're even less sophisticated than them, because they don't have anything compared to. They don't understand. They can't place themselves in somebody else's shoes, because they've never been there. They've never even heard about anybody. They haven't read anybody doing this kind of thing. So yeah, it's a complicated question, but hopefully I've made myself or my views clear on that. Number 11, measure yourself based on your answers to the previous 10 questions. Would you qualify as a book snob? Well, as I said at the beginning, the book snob is, different of editions. Now, I have preferences, and I am snobbish about that for my own. So I would say I'm a snob for that kind of thing, because even though it's a preference, I do look down on, for myself, books that are generally ex-library or destroyed or in rough shape or heavy underlining in, highlighting in. So I am a snob in that sense for this, and it is a preference. But with somebody else who collects books or don't even collects books, they just consume books, they read, they get books. It doesn't matter the condition, if it's readable. That's great. That's great. I'm not a snob in that sense to look down on somebody about it. I look down upon my choices of books, so I will not have certain things in my library, like or book collection. I don't like always calling a library, but my book collection, like books that are moldy, books that are pages are missing. I do have exceptions to these things, but they're very, very rare exceptions. So yes, on one hand, I would say I am snobbish towards the physical aspect of a book, but only from my perspective. I would not look down upon anybody else for doing this. I jokingly say stuff like that at times, but hopefully it's a joke for this. And when I see somebody, it is like that. I sort of want to know, like, why do they, collect only paperbacks for some reason. Some people do it for other reasons. And I thought, well, what would you do if you found something like this, like a beautiful book that I think is beautiful? Wouldn't you want to start collecting it? And I'd be asking questions like that. And whatever their answers are, I wouldn't look down upon them for negative answers of negative towards mine in any shape or form. But yes, I am a book snob. I prefer hardcovers and best condition because they're sturdier, they last longer, and there's just something pleasing to the eye to see hardcovers on the shelf. But there's also very pleasing to see vintage paperbacks, like vintage science fiction paperbacks. There's something very pleasurable there as well, but each in their own place. I'm not tagging anybody. People have been tagged left, right, and center for this. But if you want to do the tag, then please do. Thank you, BookTube.